Hey, good evening all. Another pretty sunset out there. And I suspect one reason we're getting these sunsets is because the solar azimuth is so far south and we're getting a more perpendicular line beneath the clouds because during the summertime the sun's rays coming from the west-northwest and the flow is also from the west-northwest, so I think they kind of pair up, and I think it cuts down on the solar illumination, whereas like on a night like tonight, I think we're shooting underneath the clouds. It's probably easier to draw this out. There's the sun down to the southwest. The clouds are spreading like that, and I think that kind of gives us some very neat illumination underneath these clouds. Kind of shoots right under there. Okay, anyway, let's take a look at the weather for tonight. Great Basin area showing what looks like some sort of front from the Four Corners back to California. You can see that northerly flow there around Elko and Salt Lake City. Even around Las Vegas looks like maybe a little bit of north wind. So a lot of that's probably some drainage from the higher elevations combined with the plateau high up in that region. And then down in the southern U.S., looks like we're dominated by high pressure in the southeast U.S. Right there you can see the region of calm winds from Arkansas to Georgia. And so we're getting a little bit of a divergent flow away from that high pressure area, kind of like that. And as a result, the flow out in the Gulf does have a slight offshore component right in that area there, but for the most part it's easterly, so it kind of looks like that right now. It does have an influence in Florida, so conditions there are probably a little bit cool. And then up in the north U.S., it looks like we have a new front coming in from Canada. There's the leading edge of that front right there. And then on the Great Plains itself, a little bit of a southerly flow in the north part of the plains right there. But for the most part, it looks like over Kansas, there's kind of an extension of a ridge from that high in Alabama. Okay, so here's the thermal structure of the atmosphere. Looks like the high pressure there in Alabama probably joined up with this Great Lakes system. Here's that front coming out of the northern plains. Probably looking at something like that up in that region. There's that big plateau high over Idaho. So we've got a north component there in Nevada and Utah and even Colorado. And that's an extension of this Pacific high, kind of a big maritime polar air mass extending inland. So pretty quiet along the west coast right now. But it looks like kind of stormy there. 988 millibar or 968 millibar low there on the Aleutians. We've got a little bit of an unusual weather pattern. Let's check out the long wave pattern. And we'll take it back about, let's see, this is going to be last Friday around the 24th, the day after Thanksgiving. And you can see the polar front looks kind of like that right there. Fairly zonal across North America here. But what we need to watch is this blocking pattern setting up around Greenland and the Atlantic. So watch how this comes together over the weekend and into early this week. So you can see that blocking pattern coming together there over Greenland. And it really starts building up there towards the end. And the length of that block is about 5,000 miles. So that's helping to keep the pattern kind of locked up in the U.S. We do have a couple of small-scale waves moving through the flow. but the long wave patterns are pretty well in place. A little bit of a long wave out in the Pacific, and this big long wave ridge out in the Atlantic. So one thing that we can see is these waves, they try to cut underneath that ridge. And as a result, we get these cutoff lows forming way out here, about halfway between the U.S. and the Azores. So pretty unusual pattern there, and the pattern's probably not going to change until that starts breaking up. Okay, let's take a look at the satellite imagery. I guess we'll look at the water vapor. We are getting a little bit of moisture coming in from the Pacific, and that's helping to create some of the beautiful sunsets there. So that's that Pineapple Express moving northeast across the U.S. there. Okay, pretty good crowd for tonight. We've got David Holcomb and Electric Dog. Sue M is here. No weather in Indiana either. Carl Berghoff is here, and Electric Dog says, nice weather is no weather. There will be weather or not. Okay, Burl H. And Funwood Tech is here. Marshall Reese talking about the wind in south central Wyoming. Lots of semis blown over the past week or so. We have Ron Chalfon in Southern California, and David Moore reporting a nice sunset also in the Metroplex this evening. Let's see what might be causing that wind. We'll go over to the surface map. Looks like maybe about 20 knots there around the Cheyenne area, but does appear to be calming down in the western part of the state. The cold front running from northwest Minnesota down to about North Platte, and looks like it's coming through the Denver and Colorado Springs area there. And behind that, the air is not too terribly cold. In fact, it's above freezing for the most part. Freeze line way up over Calgary to about Saskatoon down to Winnipeg. So it's a fairly mild pattern there. In fact, you've got to go way out to the Great Basin high to find sub-freezing air. And it looks like probably a little bit of an inversion there in the valleys. Snake River Valley, temperatures in the 20s there. Okay, elsewhere around the U.S., let's see here. Pretty quiet in Texas here. Looks like a weak little system moving through the western Missouri area. And I'll bring up the mesoscale sector here. And this shows what was moving through Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas earlier today. This low pressure system there in Oklahoma. So this is a kind of a little wave moving through the flow. Cold air moving to the south here. Cold air in place over Tennessee, but a little incursion of warm air there into Oklahoma. So during the day, we saw it move up into Minnesota there. Weak little front moving through East Texas there. And rather mild air coming in behind that front. Lots of 60s. So for the rest of this evening, what we're going to see is just kind of a mild night. Some cool air coming south from Oklahoma. And by sunrise, temperatures in the 40s through most of this region here. Freeze line well up to the north in Kansas. And looks like a little bit more cold air coming south during the day tomorrow. So a pretty good south wind starting to set in, driven by this high over western Kansas. Okay, elsewhere around the country, we do have a Midwest sector. About half the time I forget that Midwest sector, but there it is. So let's see what we're going to be looking at for today. Looks like a little bit of an incursion of cold air up to the north. And looks like it's driven by a ridge or kind of a high pressure area right there over Wisconsin. So a big high there. To the east of there, we've got westerly flow. And then down over Indiana and Illinois, we've got northerly flow. So what's going to happen overnight? That high is likely going to shift across Michigan. And there it goes, departing out towards Lake Ontario and Lake Erie. And then overnight, let's see, what are we looking at overnight? Southerly flow, kind of a mild night. And then we've got that next system approaching from the west. So by about sunrise, that'll be coming into the Milwaukee and Chicago area, down through Quincy and down to Columbia. And then during the day tomorrow, that will be moving into Indiana. Very, very mild, actually. 50s tomorrow there in Indiana. And then during the evening, looks like we get some cold air moving in. I think that's probably just because the air is so dry there. The main region of high pressure is down to the south. So this is mostly probably just a lot of dry air radiating during the overnight hours tomorrow night. And then pretty quick warm up the next day back up to 40s. Elsewhere around the country, the southeastern U.S., under the influence of this high pressure in Atlanta, so we've got north wind along the coast. And then overnight, wow, very warm night, 50s and a few 60s. So there's tomorrow morning there, 54 there in Atlanta, high pressure across South Carolina and Georgia. So I guess I would call this kind of a mild pattern. And then for tomorrow, warming up to the 70s, most parts, 79 there at Tampa. And then looks like we get the front coming in from the west there, kind of a weak push of cold air. And that'll be advancing through Alabama and Georgia, and then kind of stalling out around the Florida panhandles on Friday. All right, let me go ahead and take it forward and get the forecast set up. We don't have a whole lot of weather going on tonight, so we'll just kind of look ahead. And we do have a big weather change coming up for the next week or two. In fact, it gets kind of dramatic there towards the end. Okay, so there's the current weather picture. You can see that cold front coming down from the Dakotas. Okay, so moving forward overnight, a little bit of a push of cold air into the Great Lakes region. And as we saw, not very far south with that cold push. Most of the cold air stays up in the Great Lakes area. High pressure in Kansas, so that'll keep things a little bit cool, or I should say mild, across the central U.S. You can see the north flow over the next day or two in the southern U.S. And then we get to the weekend. We'll have high pressure across the northeast U.S. right there. And pretty quiet across the eastern half of the U.S. Also quiet out west. And then finally, it looks like we do get a system come together around Sunday. So we'll kind of keep an eye on that right there. Southerly flow starts picking up in Texas and the Central Plains around the second day of next week. And there's a system coming together right there. And it looks like it's fairly dry, but it starts pushing southward around Monday and Tuesday. A little bit of precip there for the Great Lakes. And that pushes southward. Looks like the main high-pressure area driving that is in the Montana and Idaho area. So, shouldn't be too severe. Some of the coldest air will be up in the Great Lakes area and mostly affect that region right there. So not a very cold push. But, yeah, looks like a little bit of snow there for the Texas Panhandle. And then we see a little bit of a Alberta Clipper coming in behind on the 7th. I think the model might have actually cooled this whole air mass down a little bit compared to yesterday's run. It's actually got a little bit of a colder appearance. And then the big changes that come up are for towards the 12th, 13th, and 14th. Now here we get a very strong push of cold air. You can see 1048 millibars up in British Columbia. So this is probably a 1050 to 1053 millibar high, which is very strong. And this should have a pretty big impact for Seattle and Vancouver. You can see the pressure gradient back behind here. So probably a chance of snow in that area. And there's the western edge of that, and some pretty cold air coming in behind. This is on the 12th and 13th. And look what blooms in the central U.S. This looks like a new system coming together here in the central U.S., fed by the southerly gradient. So we're talking about the 13th here. And one thing that you notice is the height patterns, or the thickness patterns out here in the southwest U.S. It's got kind of a trough-shaped appearance. And this is indicating an upper-level low with low and mid-level cold air. This troughing is helping to generate weather along that polar system there. So things should be getting pretty active around the 14th or 15th. And there, it comes southward pretty quickly. Front moves through on the 14th. So obviously that's going to represent a major pattern shift there, and possibly some severe weather for the southeast U.S. And you can see how active things are there, how active things are in Washington and Oregon. So we should have a lot to look at around the middle of the week. Oh yeah, even for the northeast U.S., they're not left out. Looks like a pretty good storm system coming together in the northeast, but it looks like this is not going to be a particularly wintry storm. You can see the freeze line pretty far back, and the 540 line also staying pretty far to the north there. Okay, so pretty quiet this week, and maybe a change in about 10 days, 10 to 15 days. We'll check that out later. Okay, a question from Beulah Johnson about the hemispheric shots. Hemispheric shots, that's going to be I've got about 37 windows open. There it is. Yeah, that's going to be Penn State. So, yep, Ron Chalfont's got that right on the money. And that's about all I got for tonight. And speaking about money, I need to get back to work on the book. And hopefully get that finished tonight. So anyway, Take care, and we will see you tomorrow night. Have a good one.